A new report from the Wisconsin Policy Forum shows the rate of homelessness across the state is on the rise. On Action 2 News at 4, we first told you about organizations like Pillars in Appleton, which provides resources to those who are struggling. Tonight in the First Alert Update, Jamal James talked to the organization about the support they provide and the additional support they still need.
Homelessness can happen to anyone. Finances, escaping violence, and housing are among some of the reasons why someone could end up unhoused. Pillars is one of several organizations in the area trying to fight this growing issue.
They do so much work day in and day out in service of the community. It's unsung work, it's challenging, and we're dealing with a massive problem that was not of our own making in our local communities. But they do it with spirit and with care every single day.
Since the pandemic, the cost to rent in Wisconsin, just like across the nation, has increased dramatically. With the average rent in Appleton coming in at about $900, Pillars looks to help people out with affordable housing. One of the programs offered by Pillars is housing for those on fixed incomes.
We own and operate 40 properties consisting of 140 housing units, and we rent those out to individuals at an affordable rate. We only charge 30% of somebody's income, so rather than a set scale, it's kind of a sliding scale.
The popular program struggles to keep up with demand.
So as people are left in shelter longer, that means that there's people left on the waiting list longer. So really it backs up the full system. So we're sometimes asked about a need for additional shelter space, but really the community-wide issue is on the housing side.
The organization says it's underfunded by $150,000 a year. Anyone interested in donating time or money to the cause can find the link at WBAY.com. In Appleton, Jamal James, Action 2 News.